second. Let's unmute that mic. Hopefully, you guys can hear me now. There you go. Sorry. Tech Challenges. Welcome to another Properties and Beers. And despite the tech challenge at the start, I wanted to have a chat. And here's the headlines. Melbourne rents just jumped by $20 a week in a single quarter. None of this $2 for the whole year bull crap that the federal government said. Another 1,040. Oh, sorry, let me clear that up. This is live, right? Just to put that in perspective, that's a $1,040 a year coming out of the average tenant's pocket. At the same time, there's plenty of property buyers out there still sitting on the damn sidelines, waiting to see what happens with your prices, interest rates, and the new tax rules. Honestly, the only thing you get sitting on the fence, as I've said for the longest time, is splinters. So we've got this unusual gap going up where the rental income's moving, housing demand's still there, and in parts of the market, property prices remain relatively subdued. Let me ask you a question. Could these be one of those periods where income improves before property values begin moving again? That's what we're getting into tonight. So, before we get started, if you're first time you've seen me, welcome to Properties and Beers. My name is Gaurav Gupta. We do this live, good, bad, ugly, and everything, right? I'm the CEO and founder of Ethical Property Investments. We help everyday Aussies invest in high cash flow housing that both do good and make money. And tonight, I want to take you through 3 areas of your life that could have a very real effect on your next property decision. We look at why the rental market might be creating an opportunity for investors. We're going to be talking about granny flats and how some property owners might be able to create another income from land that they already own. And then we're going to cover SMSF residential lender borrowing and the deadline coming on 10th of August, including 2 current SMSF-friendly opportunities that are inside our yield club for our clients. And one of these is already producing rent of over 78 grand a year. Pretty cool, right? Now, there's a bit to work through, so grab a drink and stay with me. Because the goal tonight is help you work out where you are, where the opportunities might be, and where the risk sits, and whether this could help you build more of a specific cash flow positive portfolio. Now, before we get started, this is Properties and Beers. What do we have today? We have Asahi Dry Fusions. Now, I was speaking to a good friend of mine, Jared, earlier today, who heads up quite a few amazing companies. And he said, Gora, I think in Properties and Beers, you need to have a Japanese beer. So Asahi, thanks to you, Jared. Lemon yuzu. Oh, it's delish. Not as sweet as what you think. In fact, it's just got like a hint of lemon as a smell, like the essence of lemon, but it's still got that Asahi crispness and followed by a slightly bitter note. So this is actually quite good. I was going to do that dangerously well. I'm going to put it in my Do Good and Make Money coaster. Right? So let's start with the rental market because you know what? There's been something quite important happening underneath the property headlines. You might have heard that property investors are pulling back. You might have heard that buyers are uncertain. You might also hear that parts of Melbourne are experiencing softer property prices. And you know what? It's actually true. All of those things can be true while rental demands continue to rise because guess what? People still need somewhere to live. While there's no negative gearing and all these government damn things, families still are being formed. Workers are still moving between suburbs and cities. And overseas migration, whether we like it or not, continues to add demand while the supply of new housing has struggled to keep pace before and is struggling even more, right? Yeah, sorry. Now, I'm going to get my high horse here, right? Someone kind of said this. What? Okay, it should make no sense to drive investors out of the market, and that's what the government's trying to do. Because when fewer rental properties are available, then demand gets concentrated amongst the homes that remain. And that's where rents begin moving. So according to the June 2026 rental figures, Melbourne's median advertised weekly rent reached $600. That was a 3.5% increase in one quarter, equal with Perth for the fastest quarterly rental growth amongst the capital cities. Now, for the typical tenant, that increase represents another $20 a week or $1,040 a year. Nationally, advertised rents reached a new record during the quarter where vacancy remained tight and housing supply stayed constrained. Now, Think about what that means from an investor point of view. It's not rocket science. If a property was renting for 580, now achieving 600, the income's improved. If the property purchase prices stayed relatively flat or has softened, the gross yield has also improved. That creates a buying window. You might have better negotiating conditions on the way in while the rental market is already giving property more support. In fact, I have a property right now that one of my clients looking at that has no business being in the 700s range. However, it should actually be over $1 million for what it is and where it is. I'm not going to tell you where it is because my client needs it first, right? But it has no business being, geez, it's like just over $1,000 a square meter in an area that's tightly held right next to a school, right? So I'm not going to say where it is, but of course, I want to say Melbourne's a very large market, and house in one suburb performs completely different in a suburb 20 minutes down the road. And I saw that today because you still need to examine vacancy, local employment, population movement, the type of housing tenants are actually seeking. Because you know what? There is a part of Melbourne, I'll be absolutely honest with you, where I saw a property go from 750 to 650K because of these announcements. You can see the drop in announcements down 50K, and you can see another drop in the announcements by another 50K when the SMSF announcement was done. So you see those two drops down. It started to peak back up. However, a property 20 minutes down the road we were looking at, actually about 25 minutes down the road we were looking at, it didn't even have a 20 grand drop. What a difference. 100K drop versus 20K drop because they announced that down. That 20K, anyone who's been in property for more than 10 minutes knows that a 20K drop on $1 million property isn't very large. It's 2%, right? Now, a rising citywide median will never rescue a poorly selected property. That's my point. But when you find an area where the buying conditions are still subdued and rental demand is still strong, but supply is limited, you might be looking at a very different opportunity from what the general headlines suggest. And there's another layer to this. The cost and policy environment for investors has changed, right? Victorian landlords have dealt with the higher land tax, additional rental requirements, and increased costs in maintaining compliant properties. At the federal level, negative gearing is due to limited builds. Only on the new builds, it's limited to from the 1st of July 2027. And investors who purchase established housing after that budget night will generally be unable to offset the excess residential losses against income as wages. Now, you can offset them at the end when you decide to sell it as part of your capital gains as a carry forward. Now, there is a 50% capital gains tax discount, which is due to be replaced by future gains with an inflation-based calculation with a minimum 30% rate for existing properties. Now, the full impact of these changes will take time to work through. I'm sure if you've been watching my properties and reviews, you know I've gone through them in detail. The concern to me is what happens to future rental supply if more investors choose to sell or decide against purchasing, right? Now, the housing shortage doesn't disappear because investor confidence falls. A tenant still needs a home. Not all tenants are in the financial position to have 40, 50, 60, 100,000, $200,000 saved up to buy a house. That I call bullshit from the government, right? And because when rental supply falls while demand continues, rents, they tend to face upward pressure as we've already seen. And as I predicted 2 months ago, circa, when the government announces. Now, I also need to acknowledge the human side of that before I go further. A higher rent, it might improve the investor's return. At the same time, it puts real pressure on the person living in the property. It might force someone to move further away from the work, take children out of familiar school area, or move away from family on the services they rely on. And that's why the answer can't be simply squeezing as much rent as possible from an ordinary house. The better question is, how do we provide housing, provide a good living experience, and create enough income for the investment to remain sustainable? A win-win. What a concept, right? Do good and make money. That's where a high-income property strategy actually might become really relevant. A cash flow positive investment, right? I've got the shirt, is generally in a better position to absorb changing rates, repairs, periods of vacancy. It can also make the life easier. It can also make life easier for the owner and you maintain the property well and hold it for a longer term. So the current investor window comes down to this. In selected markets, you might be able to buy while conditions are still softer, and that's the benefit that you have. alongside with rental income that's already moving north significantly. And for investors who already own property, that opportunity might be even closer. It might even be sitting in the backyard. Now, let's chat about this. You're like, Goro, what is this backyard thing stuff you're talking about? Now, that's what granny flats. Funny name. Some people call it something else. I like the funny name, right? That name makes some people picture a tiny little room in the back where someone's granny's knitting something. It might be where the name came from. But today's granny flat is a fully self-contained second home. We're talking 2, in some cases 3 bedrooms. They've got their own kitchen, bathroom, living area, entrance. In Victoria, these are formally referred to as small second homes, right? They can be up to, I'm not going to, you know what, do some Google. I'm not going to give away the secret source. But you do not need a town planning permit to provide the properties under a certain size, as long as you don't have flooding and environmental controls and all that other funky stuff there. You still need a building permit for these granny flats, and the dwelling needs to meet the relevant design, safety, and amenity requirements. And, beers. And it also remains on the same title as the main house. You can't sell a granny flat separately. So here's a question. Why are investors becoming interested in them? Because there's plenty of Australian properties that have land that produce zero income. You've got a backyard that's barely used in some of your houses, right? Might have a 3 or 4 better property sitting on 600 square meters. Hey, better put that backyard to use, because we have something called a housing crisis in this country. You might have side access enough behind the house, and you might own a property that's performed well for capital growth, but the rent, it kind of sucks for your portfolio. That land might be able to use a house, another tenant, to create a second rental income for you. Let's say you already own a house that rents for, say, $600 a week, median house price. A well-designed granny flat in the rear, after assessing local demand, could rent between $400 to $550, even $600 a week. You can almost double your rent in some cases, right? That property's moved from one income of $600 a week to $1,100 or even $1,200 a week rent. Look, of course, the exact rent is going to depend on the location, design, tenant demand, but the principle, well, it's really straightforward. You're adding income without purchasing more land. Now, for someone that's trying to create positive cash flow, that could be really appealing. You got to be really careful. None of this, like, I've seen these things, hey, I'm going to import something from China and that's going to work. No, it ain't. It doesn't fit Australian standards. And here's the thing, right? What I really love about this strategy is you're adding housing in an established area where people might already want to live. Now, my name's not Jack, and I love what he does. What I suggest is that if you've got an existing property, let's have this conversation around how you can increase the yield by another $500 to $600 a week. Right now, as long as it's near public transport, employment areas, or family support, there are renters who want smaller private homes right now without paying for a full-sized house, and a well-designed granny flat gets to meet that need. And this is, though, where I want investors to be careful. A large backyard doesn't automatically mean numbers will work. I need to check access. Can the tenant enter without walking through the front household's private area? Because the last thing you want is to build something which takes away the rental ability of your front house, right? Will both homes have enough privacy? Where's the bins going to go? How's the electrical and water managed, right? Then we need to look at the build itself. How much will it cost from beginning to rent ready? What rent is actually achievable in the area? How many people are looking for that kind of thing? And how long is this whole process going to take? What's the income going to be lost if the main house needs to be vacant during a certain part of the work, or you need to subsidize the rent for that work? You also need to consider the effect on the existing houses. If the granny flat takes away the entire backyard, blocks natural sun, or makes parking difficult, the appeal of the front house is probably going to fall. You could gain income at the back and weaken the asset at the front, and that's what we don't want. The design's got to make both homes functional. That's where the strategy work becomes so valuable, right? We compare the total cost with the additional annual rent. We allow for management, maintenance, insurance, potential vacancy. We look at how the completed property could be valued. And then we test whether the extra income genuinely improves the owner's borrowing position or the ability to hold property. And then and only then, a granny flat, which is what I like to call it, remember, might create positive cash flow for one investor and be an expensive distraction for another. So, here's a simple way to think about it. Some investors are trying to buy the next property when the first property is still using too much of their income. Middle ground might be adding a granny flat to help improve that first property before they choose to take on another purchase. That extra rent could then build a buffer, reduce the amount they contribute each month, and help them move closer to a cash flow positive position. And yes, this is one of the reasons we've recently added granny flats to one of our newer property and strategy sites inside the Yield Club. Oh, by the way, I've got one cool thing to share with you. I've got one client I'm working with right now. He's building a 6-bedroom co-living house, and there's enough land in the back. We helped him secure a massive land block to put a 2-bedder granny flat on the back. He can get this, up to 8 rents from one piece of land, right? It's pretty cool. So we're looking at opportunities for people, though, who already own suitable land, as well as properties where a granny flat might actually form part of the investment plan right from the beginning. Now, I'm not going to tell every owner with the backyard to start building, because we still need to inspect the site, understand the council building requirements, and what area it's in, depending on what kind of granny flat will be suitable for them, right? So sometimes the best next property is actually a new purchase. Sometimes the best next step is improve the income from what you already own. Either way, it's fine. And sometimes after running the numbers, the correct decision is to leave the damn backyard alone. The value of doing the strategy work is really important before committing to the build. Now, speaking of decisions that need to be worked through properly, there's adequate coming up now that the SMSF investors need to understand. And I discussed this on last week's episode. The date is 10th of August. Before I get started, I need to drink some beer. Now, SMSF residential borrowing, that window is closing in under 4 weeks. And there's been a fair bit of confusion around exactly what that means. Here's a simple explanation. A residential property, it can still be held inside an SMSF. An SMSF can still purchase residential property using available cash, subject to normal superannuation rules and the fund's investment strategy. This change, it applies to new borrowing used to purchase residential property. From the 10th of August, new limited recourse borrowing arrangements would generally be restricted to eligible business. Right? Now, existing eligible borrowing arrangements are also protected, and the contracts have to be changed before the 10th of August. And that might continue under the transition provision. So if you're buying a property and you sign up, you don't have to exchange on the property, but as long as the contracts are exchanged, you get to do it. Now, you can't refinance an existing arrangement moving forward right now, but some banks are changing that. So moving forward, you still might be able to do it. But that also means anyone that's considering using the SMSF to borrow for residential investment has got a real deadline. And I want to be really careful with the word urgency here. Urgency means speaking with your accountant, financial advisor, and broker straight away. If you have not got an SMSF set up, let me be very clear, it's too damn late. Right? If you have one set up, let's have a chat very quickly. Drop me a message today, because you know what? It is urgent to have that conversation, but it's not urgent to make an unsuitable property decision. The calendar is running out, but not for a bad property decision. Nothing can cover that shit up, right? Normal due diligence still needs to happen. A property still needs to suit the fund, needs to sufficient liquidity after the purchase, and the rent needs to be realistic, right? And most importantly, not tax advisor, not a financial planner. So the members in it need to understand how the investment fits their retirement objectives and risk position. A deadline doesn't turn an average property into the best one on the planet. However, we've got 2 SMSF-friendly opportunities that show the range of income available in today's market. The first one is priced at $700,000. The estimated rent currently is $44,200 a year, giving it a yield of 6.31. Now, that might appeal to an investor seeking a straightforward entry point with a strong rental return. There are many standard rental properties. I mean, 6% yield, and bloody-tastic. Why wouldn't you want that? Now, we still need to look at the headline yield. Where's it coming from? Where's the tenant demand? What's the annual expenses? How would that investment perform if the property was vacant for a period and interest rate change? Those questions are really important. And that's really important because it belongs in our Yield Club, because we've done the due diligence. We've spent 4 hours still doing due diligence on that particular property. The second one is an exclusive property to the Yield Club, fixed price, $838,000, full turnkey. It has an estimated rent of up to $78,000 per annum. We're talking at 9.3% rent. Now, that, my friend, is a significant difference in annual income. The purchase price is $138,000 higher than the first property, while the estimated rent is $33,000 higher each year. Naturally, people are going to hear the 9.3% yield and want to know more. And you know what? You should want to know more. You should want to know the property type, where it's located, what the income is, and what the ongoing management involved is. You want to know, let us know, right? You should also want to see the assumptions behind that estimate, right? So if you want details about what happens in our yield club and want to join a weekly cash flow memo, drop me a line in the chat or inbox and say, cash flow memo, right? Or it's just even cash flow. So walk you through. All right. So the opportunities that are described are SMSF friendly because they might be capable of being purchased through an eligible SMSF. That doesn't mean they're suitable for every fund, right? I've got to give my disclaimer here. Get your advisor accountant to tell you if it's right for you. The key point tonight is residential borrowing for SMSF is very limited. You've got a limited amount of time left, and your pathway is getting pretty tight. We've got less than a month left. So keep the due diligence, keep the independent advice, give yourself enough time to make a considered decision before the 10th of August deadline. Now, let's bring tonight's conversation together, right? Melbourne rents, they've risen sharply over the past quarter, while selected buyer markets remain subdued. Housing shortages continue, and the falling investor participation doesn't reduce the number of Aussies looking for a home. It might create a period where investors buy before real rental performance starts flowing more strongly into property values. And for existing property owners, a granny flat might be another way to improve your income. A suitable backyard potentially can become a second self-contained home to create another rental stream. So the site, of course, needs a finished design, protect both households and the numbers for the costs. Now, if anyone's considering residential property through SMSF, 10th of August is your deadline. It's damn close. Move promptly. Now, that's how we approach a cash flow positive property, ethical property investors. We look at the investor's position first. We assess the property, the tenant demand, and how the income might perform over time. Now, before we finish, I want you to check something. A large number of people watch Properties and Beers because Facebook and Instagram happens to show them episode, even YouTube. Then they enjoy the discussion. They scroll away without following the page. Follow the damn page. It might be good. It might be fun, right? We talk about properties all the time and what's going on in our mind. So I don't want you to miss our weekly updates, property education, and the opportunities. So have a look at the page after watching this episode. Now, by the way, if you'd like to see a little bit more about what we do inside assessing the yield club and some of my thoughts, subscribe to our weekly cash flow memo. Each weekly cash flow memo is 100% free. All you have to do is drop me a line and we'll chat about it. So honestly, it's an easy way to keep learning to see what a cash flow positive opportunity looks like before deciding whether you want to explore anything further. Now, for ethical property investments, subscribe to the weekly cash flow memo and let us know if you want to know about a yield club exclusive property producing a rent of up to $78,000 a year. That's over $1,500 a week. Thank you for spending the evening with me. Now, before I close, I like Namit's comment. It's a shame the government's closed the door on SMSF to invest, to buy rental stock. SMSFs are not for speculators in their intent to hold property for longer. You know what? I like it. I like what Namit said, and I'll tell you why. Because Namit is an expert in this space, right? Now, those that don't know Namit, have a look at him. If you're in the accounting game, you cannot afford not to know who Namit is. He will make your business pop. Now, it is a shame that the government decided to close the doors, and it's like they want the rents to go up, which is exactly what's happened. Rents have not gone down. None of this $2 a week rent increase. It's already gone up by $20 a week in Victoria, which is now the highest rental income increase after Perth. That says something, guys. Remember when Perth was the darling child and Victoria was was Cinderella in the corner? Well, she's getting ready to go to this ball, so to speak, using that analogy. That's what's happening out there. I think if you wait too long, you're going to miss the growth opportunity. That's right, rents are going up and up and up. I don't know if you've seen the start of the episode. Melbourne's gone up by $20 in the last quarter alone. That says a lot, right? Other states are going up, but not as much as Melbourne and Perth. Right? And it's just crazy. I don't know what the government's doing and why they're doing it, but hey, you know what? And people are now saying, hey, maybe you should invest in the stock market. And they said, well, guess what? You've got more exposure to your capital gains issues on stocks rather than property. But I'm not here to give financial advice and compare the two. But I'm just saying the difference in the two happening. And you know what? I'm seeing less properties get built. There's less demand out there for building property, which means the rents are only going to go one way. And now another thing, I was watching. I want to share. I'm watching Mark Boris's podcast along with the head of Cotality or RP Data, whatever they call themselves these days, and he mentioned something interesting. He was asked, "Okay, Tim, where's the best place?" Mark asked, "Hey, Tim, where's the best place to purchase?" He said, "Well, I believe that the market will be subdued for a while longer. Might go into a few years, but one area stands out amongst the rest. We've had some interesting political situation in Victoria, but typically Melbourne and Sydney house price have a 20% variance, where Melbourne is only 20% below Sydney. Currently, that chasm is over 55%. So that chasm's got to close based on long-term data and trends, right? You might have Sydney actually, Brisbane bucking that trend and being equal to Melbourne. That's fine. There's a lifestyle reason for that. But eventually that trend is your friend and it'll go down. So we're going to see one of two things happen. And I'm not a rocket scientist, but I can tell you which one I reckon is going to happen. Either Sydney prices are going to drop dramatically, or Melbourne prices, they're ready to do what Brisbane did 5 years ago. That's not my professional prediction. I'm not allowed to predict professionally. That's my personal guess. And that makes sense now. By the way, so if you guys want to know more about cash flow, our cash flow memo, drop us a line, say, Goro, I want the cash flow memo, get on it, and I'll see you guys soon. And if you're watching Properties and Beers, having a drink, enjoy your Friday, have a great weekend. Cheers, and remember, always do good and make money.